I do plan on recounting the very first time I met you story, Andy. So, in person. The in-person story.
When I asked you if you worked out a lot?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Not if I worked out a lot. It was when you started telling everybody else that I worked out. That was
Why, were you running around with your shirt off or something?
No, I don't even know how that came up. We were handing out shirts. Anytime we handed out a shirt to a leader at that same event, the conference, he's like, "This is Chad. He works out."
I'm gonna lead with that now. Like, hey, do you work out?
It's just like, so I was like, what the heck? And then even like the next day, he had to leave early, and sent me a text early in the morning. Said, "Hey, just checking. Did you work out?"
I love it.
I think it's because I went for a run and I felt a little lonely going for a run without you, Chad. I think that's what happened.
Then you would have felt lonely because I don't run. Welcome back to the Ministry Without Hating It podcast, a ministry of Odyssey Haven coaching and counseling dedicated to the pursuit of answering the question, is it possible to do ministry without hating it? We have a theory that just might be. Brenton, today we just had a great conversation with someone who we're both getting to know better. But every time I talk and I'm with, I enjoy more and more. And there's just a depth and a level to this leader, Andy Sloan. Enough with the tease of who this is. That man, I just really appreciate, but he's also just so down to earth and comes from a place of telling his own story. And this was a great conversation, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We should do it again.
We should. We're just going to add that to the list of just one of these days we're going to stop asking new people on and just do reoccurring, right? And we'll just go that route. So.
I was thinking, or you could just replay the episode.
Or you could do that. But then we don't have our creative outlet. So
there you go.
Anyway, well, listen, we've talked a lot of nonsense, enough nonsense anyways. Let's just go ahead and get on with the interview here. So without further ado, we hope you enjoy our conversation with our friend, Pastor Andy Sloan. Well, Andy Sloan, you're here. You made it. Thank you for joining us on the Ministry Without Hating It podcast. Welcome.
It's good to be here.
Well, so the running joke is we'll see. We'll see.
I did call Chad yesterday saying, "Hey, Chad, I've got some bad news about
this is
tomorrow."
True.
I just wanted to stress him out a little bit. And
which we have backups upon backups.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, the guest list for this show, it's literally a wait list.
I thought I was on.
I didn't stress at all.
They're calling us now.
That's right. In fact, I'm going to screen that one's the president of Foursquare. Sorry, just had to put him on voicemail. So none of that is true. And all of this is staying in. By the way, all of this is staying in. So, Andy, I know you've listened to like at least one of these. Mm-hmm. We like to start off by asking questions that have nothing to do with ministry, but need to be asked anyway. So your very first question is, what is your favorite scent? And here's the follow-up. Is this the most ridiculous question you've ever been asked?
No, is the answer to the second part.
Oh, wow. Then we'll need a part B for that.
Yeah, I was a youth pastor for years, so I don't feel like this is the most ridiculous question.
Okay.
I think the most ridiculous question that caught me off guard was while I was preaching, someone asked me, "Do all men grow hair on their toes?"
Oh.
I was like, yeah, that's a good time to ask that question, but sure, let's go there. My favorite scent. Oh man. I mean, we could go like actual answers, like the smell of cut grass, all of those things. But for me, it's no question asked, apart from that one, would be the smell of the ocean. The sound and the smell of the ocean will always be the top number one.
Okay. Is there a particular ocean that you lean towards, that you favor?
I've spent...
Because they do have different smells.
They do. Yeah. And colors.
They do.
And
Yeah, colors.
That's right.
The Atlantic, I've spent most of my time, so we'll just say that one.
All right, you go with that.
Yeah.
Final answer. All right. What sport would you compete in if you were in the Olympics?
Well, what I'm about to say is 100% true. You may not believe me, but I am a qualified dodgeball coach. I have paperwork, and I did.
Is that in the Olympics now?
Yeah,
Is that on your wall?
3 of my
behind you?
team mates now play for the national England team.
Stop
and it was
a national English
it was
team.
tried to get into the Olympics, the last 2 Olympics, but there's been a disagreement of.
They keep dodging that one.
They do keep dodging that one.
You see what I did there?
Dodgeball's a really fun game when you actually I
Yes,
played on a club level and pretty intense. So I would say dodgeball, but
I don't mean to laugh. I just every time you say this, I just think of what is it, the Average Joes? And their in the movie there. So
that was our inspiration. So
was it?
But yeah, dodgeball would be up there. I used to compete running, but yeah, dodgeball is probably up there.
So, sidebar with this: if they manage to get it in to the Olympics, that's something that it's still on the table for you.
No.
No. Oh,
no.
okay.
I think I need to hang that on the mantle. I think I've let that dream die.
Oh.
Yeah. Sorry.
If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge.
That's
a ball.
not true. It's easier to throw a ball than it is a wrench. So.
Oh. Wow.
I feel like I've tried.
I feel like everything. I was about to say everything just
yeah.
That whole movie just collapsed.
Just because the phrase sounds cool doesn't mean it's true. I mean, we can talk about that in the church culture too, but
that's
yep.
Okay, I'll go ahead and make a note of that. Brenton, will you write that down?
Yeah,
we'll put a pin in that one. All right, this is kind of an ongoing. We don't ask it all the time, but we have here and there. In your opinion, is a hot dog a sandwich?
No,
no. Okay, first time I've heard this.
It's a taco. Because it's all to do.
Let's hear it.
It's all to do with most meals are based on the position of the carbohydrate or the gluten, and so for a sandwich, it has to be 2 uncut, 2 individual bits of bread with anything in between.
Okay.
So a hamburger's a sandwich, right? But a taco is 1 bit of a carbohydrate that is connected on 1 point. Like a like Pac-Man. So
this is really well thought through. However,
so sushi is a burrito.
Oh, interesting.
Because a burrito is on the outside, right? And then the food is on the middle.
But you do have the sushi where it's on top. What do they call it? I can't.
Yeah, then that's an appetizer.
That's
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't eat sushi.
You're just punching holes in all of my
you can go home.
Apparently, a wrench it's not easier to dodge, and now even how I see food.
Those are probably the only 2 questions you're going to ask me today that I am confident in my answers. So I'll stay confident in those answers. But no, I would say it's a bread-based taco, is what I would say.
Bread-based taco.
Yep.
For those allergic to corn shells, hot dogs.
Put that on t-shirt.
Or you do flour shells too, though. I guess. I don't know. I'm trying to. Sometimes I try to be helpful, and it's not. keep in mind too. By the way, Andy, Brent and I haven't seen or talked to each other for a couple of weeks now, and so our chemistry may be off just a little bit today. I'm just gonna.
He hasn't smelled my scent in a while.
Is that your favorite scent? Is that your favorite scent?
He hasn't made it to. He hasn't made it to the pancake breakfast in I don't know how long, and so we're just kind of it's fine. And we don't have Dustin; he's out saving Missouri with a fire or something, is what he told me today. So that's
what an excuse.
All right, what do you? If you're gonna have one, that's it, right? I was fighting another forest fire.
By the way, that is my favorite scent is forest fire, not forest just fire. Cedar burning.
Interesting,
like a fire.
Like the actual forest on fire is your favorite?
Well, that's scent? If it's cedar, I like.
This is the hard-hitting stuff that our listeners tune into, and I just want to thank you all for joining us. This has been a great interview. And
sorry, Dustin.
What are you reading or listening to right now?
Apart from the sound of your voice? Oh man.
Yes.
A couple of years ago, I actually became a reader, so this question is still strange to me, but
you caught me mid-drink on that one.
yeah.
Sorry, go. I just started reading a couple years ago. It's been great.
Yeah, a couple books. I'm going through a couple of deep dives on Lent, and especially how formation is most received around a table. But the one I've been kind of geeking out on one is called Seeking God by Trevor Hudson. I had the privilege of meeting him in Cape Town. Just amazing. He kind of goes through some early church culture and how we can discern the voice of Jesus in our lives. So, yeah, Seeking God by Trevor Hudson. It's a good one.
Why has that got you geeking out?
I think anything that right now in my life that looks at like early monastic movements in like, this is about to get real nerdy real quick, in like the 3rd, 4th, or 5th century, is I'm becoming fascinated by. I said this at church recently, but I said I recently turned 35, and I said that like something happens, I think to most men in their mid 30s, that they either get like they spend too much money at Home Depot, or they get into like World War II documentaries, and like there's a couple categories, or they just get into some strange hobby. Mine has been studying monastic movements of the early church, and I have found it enlightening, healing, fascinating, and yeah.
Well,
yep.
I might slide on the Home Depot side.
Yeah, I am the furthest away from a Home Depot person you'll ever find.
All right. Well, let's talk more about it. That's gonna be fun. That's gonna be fun. All right, so we'll segue out of it into this, and maybe it's some of what you even just said. What do you find exciting, or find yourself looking forward to right now as you look ahead?
Just in general in life.
Sure.
Oh man, what am I finding exciting? There's a place near my house called Daniels Park. I live in South Denver, and it's kind of this, I guess, like protected lands that bison, I don't actually know the difference between buffalo and bison. Maybe they're the same thing, but they're on this land. It's next to a golf course, and it's a very quiet area that it's like overlooks the Rockies and stuff. And I've been disappearing up there at selected moments of the day or very early in the morning with a coffee cup, not a thermos, just an actual coffee mug or tea mug.
not a Stanley.
Oh no,
a gigantic
just
Stanley.
old school, whatever you find in the cupboard, and I'll just go drink the cup of tea or coffee for 10-15 minutes in complete silence, no phone, no music, and I just enjoy the quiet. Sometimes there's a profound moment, and other times it's cold. But I'm finding that has been my highlight of my day every time I've done it.
That does line up with the monastic bent as well.
I may have stolen that.
Interesting. Brenton, I think he's looked up the difference between a buffalo and a bison, but he's also muted, and one of us has to do this at least once an interview. So go ahead.
I just felt like you were running over my talking. I was like, what is going on? He just keeps talking over the top of me. The most obvious is a large hump on the back of a bison.
Okay.
Buffalo do not have a hump.
Oh, so there is buffalo and bison. There's two different things.
Yeah, there's a difference. Yeah, bison have a massive head, but buffalo have a head that's smaller and more cow-like. Buffalo live generally in warmer climates. There's a whole list.
What just happened here? What is going on? How did this...
I feel like next time I go to this area, I'm just going to be looking at them being like, large hump, small head.
Right.
That's for sure. That's a bison. Yep. That's how you know. Well, okay, Andy, so enough of that.
Yeah.
There's also water buffalo.
Apparently we're not done. Go ahead. Go ahead.
That's it.
Did you wiki this? What are we doing?
Yeah, it's right here. That's my job. That's why you have me here.
Yep. Uh-huh. That's why. So listen, you and I, Andy, we get to serve on a team together, but I don't know you real well.
Yeah.
And so this is a great opportunity to get to know you. At least I hope.
Yep.
But I do think I will say this: just in my short time getting to know you, not only are you hilarious and great to be around, I do think you bring a lot of wisdom and just a lot of insight. And so I am excited to hear what it is that you have to share, not just with me, but with our listeners as well. But all that being said, tell us a little bit about your story and maybe even your ministry story, and how have you found yourself where you are right now?
Oh, geez.
Yeah, real short. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So as you, yeah, as you can,
Distill 35 years. Go.
yeah, 35 long years. As you can probably tell by my accent, I'm not from the Denver, Colorado area originally.
Wait.
Um,
What?
so make the 35-year story as short as I can. Born in England, dad was in the Navy, mom was in real estate. Um, we have a phrase in England. I don't know if you guys have it here. We call it 2.4 kids. Like you have the house, you have the cars, you know, 2 kids or 1 on the way, and yeah, it's so. I mean, everyone's story is so complex, and there's so many things that you miss out when you tell a story. So the main chapters are what they both they came to faith later on in life. I think in their in their college years, and yeah, incredible story even in that of itself. But they decided to sell everything they have and join the ministry full time and become missionaries. So they actually went to go do a discipleship school with YWAM in central England. And when I was 2 years old, that's when it happened. Um, so yeah, sold everything and just did that with a 2 and a 5-year-old. It's pretty radical.
So you were on the mission field at
Yeah, and then we
age
moved
two.
to Kenya
Okay.
during that time, and
Oh wow.
through a dream that my brother had when he was 5 years old, and he told my parents about that Jesus spoke to him in a dream. My parents took that and discerned it, and we moved and we lived upon one of the mercy ships called the Anastasis, and
Oh
it
my
was a
goodness.
hospital ship that went around the coast of Africa doing medical care and evangelism and mercy ministries and stuff. So for my formative years of childhood to around the age of 10, I lived on a ship, and with
Wow.
350 crew members, 2 um, operating rooms, dental clinics. There was 50 kids on board, so I had the biggest grade of. We had 4 in our grade, and my dad was the captain. My mom was the personnel manager, and yeah, super. Obviously, everyone's like, "That's insane," but for me, 100% normal. Like everyone's childhood is normal, right? Because it's
Sure.
Right.
you define
Sure.
what normal is from your perspective. So on
Wow.
Friday nights, go show the Jesus movie if you know what that is, and see
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah.
villages come to faith and pray for people with tumors the size of their head. And as we were praying for them, disappear, legs growing back out. Just things that
Yeah.
I think people would love to see, but we'd see on a regular basis. And um, yeah, so my early childhood was formed through the lens that Christians, the forefront of Christianity is what some Christian would call mercy ministries, um, but very much this give to the poor, heal the sick, um, and then we would set up clinics all around coast of Africa and even in a little bit inland and train them how to do it and resource them and then leave because we would want them to sustain themselves. And then during middle school, high school, came back to England with my parents, went into public school, got pretty bullied, got some intense stories about worldview collision there. You know,
Wow.
just went into a very white suburban neighborhood in North London and very rich area. Culture shock up the, I want to say wazoo, but I don't know if you use that phrase here.
Yeah.
For example, I'll
Sure.
Yeah.
show
Yeah.
one quick story. Went into school on my first day. Kid came in with a cast on his arm. It was, he had a broken arm. And I asked him if I could pray for his arm. And I did, and I believed it got healed. Went inside to go get a pair of scissors to cut his cast off. Got pulled into the principal's office, which we call the headmistress, and she was like,
Okay.
"You can't do this." And remember, just like little African boy, although I'm as
Right.
white as you
Yeah.
can be, and I knew his arm was healed. Like I just knew it, and I told the principal that she struggled with unbelief, and I asked to pray for her.
Oh.
And that was like my second day on
Yes.
the job, second day at school.
Yeah.
That day I went in
That's
to go buy
amazing.
a chocolate bar at a grocery store, and I started bartering of the cost. And you
Nice.
don't do that in England, and I stormed out being like, it's
Yeah.
not worth this. And so worlds collide. Anyway, middle school, high school, did the whole youth group thing, church, but kind of swore off anything to do with ministry or missionary. I think like most what people call MKs, missionary kids, or PKs, but didn't disagree with it, wasn't burnt out or angered by it, just was like, found music.
Not for you.
Yeah, I found music quite later in life, around 17, and it was in a couple punk bands and stuff like that.
Really?
Yeah, and just
Huh.
angsty teenage, but never went
Sure.
never went fully in, just went in enough.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Which might be the most punk thing you could say right there.
yeah.
Right?
I mean, in a couple of days, MXPX and 5 Iron Frenzy are playing near my house, and I'm like, is this 1999 again?
That's right.
Yeah. Do you feel the pull though?
Oh, I'm going. I'm going.
I kind of want to go check it out.
I'm going.
Yeah.
And I was actually at the Switchfoot concert, like the 20th anniversary of A Beautiful Letdown, an album that was a big deal to me in my early teenage life. And
yeah, that's a good
they
one.
started just calling out bands that were in the room. And, I was like, oh, everyone's here. I was like the Supertones, 5 Iron Frenzy, Reliant K. Like they started naming it. And I was like, if 14-year-old Andy was here, he'd be losing his mind. And I still was.
Yeah.
I still was losing my mind.
Yeah.
So did that in England, and then through a random trip to Bulgaria and Italy, I was helping set up a missions trip just with a friend, just doing some networking type thing. Met the Lord in a deep place in my soul, and moved to Australia just after my 19th birthday. So I graduated high school at 16, and I did college, and then I finished that at 18, 19, and which is, so done college.
Normal. Yeah, that's normal.
Yeah,
that happens a lot.
It was in England, because you do graduate high school in England when you're 16. They changed that now.
Oh, really?
But, yeah, that was normal back in the 2000s. Anyway, moved to Australia, did my discipleship school with Youth of the Mission, with YWAM. And on the 29th of February 2008, just met Jesus in a deep place in my soul. Got baptized not only in the Holy Spirit, but baptized with water that day. And it just, there was a phrase that was spoken to me of, once you've tasted this, you can't go back. And
right.
And I can't explain what happened in a sense, but I just knew that I was like, something shifted. I felt like I was pretty apathetic and pretty chill going into it. And then I was just like, I've got a mission. And I didn't even know what it was. I just had it. And thought I was going to stay in Australia for the rest of my life, but moved back to England. And I actually joined Youth of the Mission full time, and was on the leadership team with one of the campuses in Northern London. So I was 21, in leadership 21, and we had 120 staff, and we would just send groups all over Europe, like 3-month outreaches, and train young people, and eat all of our meals together, live in intentional community, daily fasting, weekly gatherings, like intense, and in that time I was in a full-time band as well, and I did like 2 full-time gigs at the same time. And
what was the name of your band, and can we find it on Spotify?
No, we actually recently took it off Spotify. We might put it back.
Yeah.
But the band was called Evergreen. Very, if you know, like some genres, a very post-rock, anthemic, 9-minute songs.
9 minutes. Nice.
Yeah, we got 2 record deals.
Sounds like some worship songs nowadays.
Yeah, we got 2 record deals in our last year. We did 250 shows in our last year. And we're just on the road the whole time. And playing in clubs and venues all over the country and a little bit of Europe. And but still working in full-time missions. Anyway, I did that for 7 years. Did a bunch in that meantime. And then just suddenly felt something change. Got married 2012 to my wife of now nearly 12 years, Rebecca. We met through my mom, actually introduced us. But that's a whole other podcast.
Okay, got it. You can help us launch that one.
Oh, yeah. She's incredible. I definitely believe the phrase, I'm more in love with her now than the day I met her or married her. And we've just, I mean, when you experience life with someone for so many years, it's just so overwhelming. So we got married in 2012, and we actually moved to Durango, Colorado, and left Youth of the Mission, left YWAM, and became youth pastors and young adult pastors with this denomination called Foursquare. And she was raised up in that church. She was a teenager in that church, and we were on a visit one Christmas, and they offered us a job, and we said no. And then the Lord directed it very clearly, and then we were very excited to say yes when the Lord did. And so she was back in her hometown where she was a teenager, and now we were the youth pastors of the place she grew up in, and I became also the soccer coach of her old high school. So that was a trip.
Yeah.
And we were youth and young adult pastors for 7 years. Loved it. Teenagers fascinate me, and I was humbled to be a youth pastor. We started off having no idea what we were doing, and we left the same way. We had 5 homeschool kids when we started, middle schoolers, and our last youth group, we had the SWAT team come and help support us, just because I wanted the extra support.
Just because you want to be able to say that on a podcast someday.
Yeah.
My youth ministry needed the SWAT team support.
We would do these Nerf Wars nights where we would like deck out the entire building like it was a laser tag arena, and I wanted the SWAT team to be my personal security guards during it. So they came in with like all their holsters, and they put Nerf guns all over it. And what I failed to realize was on my last youth group, that when all the parents dropped off the kids, there was the SWAT vans in tactical position outside the church with all their lights on, and people like,
nice.
What is happening? And I was like, this is awesome. They were like, something go bad. I was like, no. And, the SWAT team would like follow me around where I would go. But we ended with a couple hundred kids and teenagers who will say I learned more from, it's called Roots Youth Group. I learned more from the Roots crew. They taught me more than I've ever taught them about, they taught me more about learning to continue following Jesus in the midst of hardship. We, in our Durango's quite a small town, and in 7 years, there was 44 suicides in the small town, and some were associated with our youth group. And there's something about looking a teenager in the eye and realizing how close they are to making that decision themselves, and when they understand Jesus and who he actually is and was and will always be, and when then they suddenly get it, it's something that you'll never unlive.
Yeah.
And then
that's good.
Somewhere in that, this thing called a pandemic happened, and in 2021, through burnout and disappointment, and through many different things, we moved to Denver, Colorado, where I am now, and I'm an associate pastor here. I oversee our missions and our young adults up here, as well as do some stuff for the district. So have 3 kids who I love. Finley, my oldest, who's 8, and Elliot, who's 6, and then my beautiful baby girl, who is 2, and her name is Poppy. And then somewhere in the middle there, I did my master's in spiritual formation and discipleship. And
wow.
Yeah.
So you've done a couple of things.
Yeah.
You've been around.
Being around the block.
That's I really appreciate you telling that. It's fascinating to me, um, what your normal
Mm-hmm.
was growing up, and even your journey even since then, um, is pretty unique, and pretty crazy in some ways. But it sounds like you've picked up a lot along the
Mm-hmm.
way. I'm curious, having actually, especially since, because I was thinking about this as you were speaking, having a very early on, understanding of ministry, and specifically what a lot of maybe even others wouldn't within, even with ministry, is the missions
Yeah.
side of
Yeah.
things. I'm curious how you define missions and ministry.
Yeah.
Are they the same? Do you get what I'm saying with
Yeah. Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
or how's your journey shaped the definition that you even have?
Yeah. I feel like, I mean, the most honest answer in that chat is I don't think I can answer that question. Like, how's anything shaped you? You know, um,
Yeah,
uh,
sure. It's very
of
deep
course.
and also very dodgy.
Yeah.
Dodgeball
Just try
guy.
to learn
That's
how to
fine.
dodge any question you ask. Full
Sure.
disclosure, full transparency, I despise both of those words.
Okay,
I think,
let's
especially in
have
the
it.
Western church, especially in American church culture, I heard someone the other day say church-ianity, which made me laugh. Instead
What?
of Christianity, church-ianity, because we say a lot of stuff.
That's
We say a
amazing.
lot of stuff in church culture, and I'm like, you don't even know what that means saying it, and you're not speaking. I mean, Americans don't speak English, let alone. But then when you add church culture, it gets even more confusing. But I mean, for
It's
me,
good
when I think
perspective.
of ministry, I think of a government institution or
Okay.
like Hogwarts, like the Ministry of Magic. Like,
Yeah.
and when people
Yeah.
like you go to an event, and you're like, this is our men's ministry. I'm like, isn't this just a bunch of dudes like having a barbecue? Um, and then we slap the word ministry on
Hey,
it. You know?
you said barbecue.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you. I get
You love
called out all
barbecue,
the
or
time because it's here in the Midwest. Everyone calls it a cookout, and barbecue
oh,
only means if you put sauce on it.
No,
So
cookout would mean
it
that
just
multiple
blew my mind.
people would be cooking and it's a competition.
Yeah.
But
I'm with you.
barbecue is singular.
the other one is carrion.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
potlucks,
Oh.
carrion, and every time I hear carrion, I think of that's a dead animal carcass. Is
Yeah,
carrion.
and when I think
And
potluck, I think of cold quiche. And I'm not complaining,
there you go.
but it's definitely
Yes.
cold quiche.
Fair.
But yeah, I just think
That's
the
fair.
word
That's fair.
missions and ministry, a lot of time we have no idea what we mean. I mean, I know what it means to
Okay.
be on mission, but when we say like you're the missions pastor, you're like, I mean, I think I can say this. I'm a missions pastor, and sometimes I don't know what that means. But what I think other people
Right.
think it means is I oversee our international partners or the missionaries who have maybe left the country and have said that they're missionaries. Amazing men and
Mm.
women who are doing things all around the world. But I think the word ministry is interesting because I think the most important ministries in our lives are the things that we don't call ministry. I think I'm
Okay.
learning as a young dad of 3 young kids. I mean, the most important thing I'm doing in my life right now is how do I love as I'm loving and pursuing and abiding in Jesus. Does that equate to me being a good husband and father? Um, and if that is my rock, if that is my foundation, then everything else will fall into place. Not that doesn't mean I don't want to
Yeah.
work hard and be on radical mission and be on my knees in prayer. You have to do all of those by being a dad. But yeah, I think we just use the word ministry and missions so often that we've lost the power of it.
Yeah. So what would you? I mean, what's the flip to that then? I mean,
Yeah,
you obviously move away from even the
yeah.
terminology, at least personally. How do you? What's the flip side of that for you then? What do you favor or move towards? And it doesn't have to necessarily be terminology, but how would you explain
Yeah.
what you just said?
I'm probably on a kick, and maybe most of us are on, is looking what does it mean to be radically on mission within a community in a suburban context. You know, in a society that on one hand thinks it has everything. What does it mean to be radically on mission while dropping off my kids at school in my ordinary mundane routine of life. What does it mean to be radically on mission in there? So I think for me, the words that have to be used in that is, what does your discipleship look like, and what does your community look like? Yeah, I think for me, to be radically on mission and to be radically in the ministry is, how does that affect my ordinary everyday life, in community, and when I choose to be in solitude by myself.
So you've used the phrase radically on mission a few times. What pull that out then
Yeah,
for me? What does that mean? Because that can have a lot of different definitions or connotations as well.
yeah. I mean, again, going back to early church culture and monastic movements, as they were unpacking what Jesus really said during especially in early 300s, in the Roman Empire, to kind of give some context, church was being persecuted, and suddenly they find themselves in a position where church becomes the official religion of the day. And in what I would say in Western church culture we think looks like success, actually was one of the greatest downfalls, it looks like, of church movement. And suddenly what we're seeing is amazing men and women who are in urban contexts, who are leaving the city to go be, quote, in the desert, or literally in the desert, or and wrestle with the fact of, so now what? Now, if the church is like, what does this mean for us? And I think for what it means to be radically on mission is, what I love about the early monastic movements is, as they went out by themselves to do that, they found that other people had started to join them, and they started creating their own communities of people who were radically on mission. For a lot of them was to commit their life in prayer and fasting. uh, I have gone on many silent retreats by myself, and I was with one lady who took this so far that she had done the same herself, Sister Anne, and she had been at the monastery. It was an abbey, actually, in North London, and she had been washing dishes and making beds for guests for 40 years, and had been in six times of prayer throughout the day, and just spending time with people like that, being like, and seeing her connection and her, what we would say, abiding in Jesus, was only brought me to tears. And you could say in a way that she wasn't radically on mission, because she was making beds and doing dishes and in prayer time, and she felt like that's what she should desperately do, was intercede for what was going on around the world, especially in Southeast Asia. And but then there's other people who I know who are radically on mission, where they feel like the Lord has called them to be a lawyer. I even think of my friend Jenna right now, who's training to be a lawyer, or my sister-in-law, who is a doctor in England, who feel deeply from Jesus that they should be in those fields, bringing integrity and hope into those fields. And so I think what it means to be radically on mission is to be intentional about wherever you are, especially and most hardly if you're a professional Christian and you work at a, quote, church.
Professional Christian. I'm so glad you said that, because I've actually said that in the middle of one of my messages. I don't get this right, because I'm a professional Christian. I actually get paid. That's really good. Well, yeah. So pull that out a little bit for us.
Yeah.
Like you said, especially pull
Yeah,
that out, because I mean, this is called Ministry Without Hating It. So
yeah,
you're onto something, I feel like.
I moved to the States 8 years ago, and what I'm finding is there's definitely this pedestal that when you're a pastor or someone in ministry, that you get put onto. Oh, that, they're these people, their life is together. As my friend Claire says, your front yard is beautiful, but your backyard's a mess. And so there's this persona, or this
nice.
ego, that your life is sorted and you've figured out everything. Figured out who Jesus is in his complexity, in everything, in his mystery, and just follow me the way I follow Christ, which is in the Bible. But there's this egotistical part of it that is on a pedestal, and which I actually think the role of people who are in full-time ministry, and I'm putting the quotations up, our role as pastors,
air quotes,
or counselors, or maybe even psychologists, but definitely for pastors, is to train and encourage others to also be following the call of Jesus on their life, and to equipping them, not to be the voice in the wilderness, but to point to the one who is. And I think we get that really wrong a lot of the times. Is yes, I have some insight, 1% insight, but actually, uh, let's follow the one who has called me first, and please don't follow me. Um, I can
Yes.
encourage you, but a 38 monologue on a Sunday morning or on a Wednesday night is not going to bring any transformation to your life.
Right.
It's good.
I think I've
I have to.
stuck with the line of, we think that information equates to transformation, and it's
Yeah.
obviously not working. Not saying that we shouldn't gather. As a local church pastor, I highly encourage gathering, and still unpacking the story of God with each other. But I have come to realize that the most profound moments of my life are normally over a very nice beverage on over a coffee shop or around the table, and hearing
Good save. Good save
yeah,
there.
and
Yeah, that was
hearing someone's stories and actually asking them,
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a couple questions I ask people when I'm with them, but how is?
What are they? Go.
Oh man, what are the tension points in your life right now?
It's good.
What is the thing that's bringing you the utmost joy? And then if I'm especially with a young adult, normally a young dude, I'll end our time together asking this question. I say, please do not answer this question, but I want you to think of it. But what is the one question you don't want me to ask you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we pray together. And I just, there's something about sitting in the tension with one another, and not to bring shame, only to bring empathy. And but yeah, so I think what ministry should look like, Chad, to go back, and what mission should look like more, is being in people's homes around the table with not only strangers, not only people you hardly know, but with deep friends, enjoying a good meal and a good glass of wine together, if that's what you do.
Oh.
Do I have to go back? And
No.
or a good cup of tea, a good Earl Grey mixed blend. And for example, I'll share one thing that we do on a Friday night around 4 o'clock. We stop everything we're doing. I turn off my phone. My wife turns off her phone, and we do the let's clean the house like someone's about to come over frantic move. And we order pizza while we're doing that. And about 2 hours later, we light 3 candles on our dining room table, and the 5 of us sit down, maybe with a guest if there's a guest over. And I lead my kids through communion. I get one of my kids to tell us the story from Genesis 1 till now in their highlights. And
Okay.
yeah, and we will break bread, we'll do communion, and then we laugh a lot together, and we talk about the week, and we enter a 24-hour period of Sabbath and delighting and going to the zoo. Mom and dad have no distractions from phone or exterior life. No self-help books are read, only novels. Maybe we'll play Bomberman on the TV, but the only digital stuff we have is the TV. And for 24 hours, we reconnect. And I can tell you that doing that for the last couple of years with my young kids has formed me more than any sermon I have listened to.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's good. I hope people they're listening caught too that even just in the simplicity of what you just said is so practical for vocational or professional,
Mm-hmm.
right? Christianity, and those that are in that in some form of action, even if you're bivocational.
Yeah.
Man, that's some good stuff.
Yeah.
That's really good. Kind of talking with some of what you've talked with your passions, and maybe drawing back to even the radically on mission. How are you able to see that then play out? So you've mentioned you're in. I keep going back to the professional Christian. I just love that. how are you able to lead others? Because you mentioned, ministry, not to use the word that you hate, but within that
I don't
setting of where
hate the
you're
word. I
at
should say
right
that.
there.
I just think
Well,
we use it and we don't really know what it means a lot of the time.
I think it's because hate is in the title of the podcast, and that's probably
For
why I keep
sure.
going back
For
to that
sure.
word. So you don't favor calling it that, but with what you're engaging
Yeah.
with, how does that play out practically in your setting and what you're doing?
Yeah. So I've established something that, again, the early church used. Is probably used more. This word I'm about to use is more used in maybe the Catholic streams of. But me and my wife have established a rule of life, and it's not necessarily what we do, but it's how we do what we do. And our rule of life is very simple. Uh, we do a deep dive Sabbath once a week. We tithe and give generously to the people in need, especially around us in our local setting. And we try and teach our kids what does generosity look like in a 2024 in suburbia. Um, we gather at least twice a week with other Christians uh, to understand how to live out the call of Jesus in our lives. Um, Part of our rule of life is we eat dinner around 5:30 together and do ask questions like, what is bringing you tension and joy as a family? And so we do things like that as our rule of life. Um, but in the midst of that, like, I'm thinking tomorrow night already, we have our young adults group that we kind of started to form here, and we rent out a coffee shop, very hipster coffee shop called Monk and Mongoose. Not a sponsor, but if you're listening, please consider it. And on a Thursday night, we meet at a coffee shop, and somebody may lead us a couple songs about Jesus. They may not. We may do a reflective contemplation of silence, and while drinking some really hipster cappuccino in the midst of a downtown area, we we ask the question, "What does it mean to be on mission with Jesus?" And most of the room are not in ministry full time. Um, and so, what does it look like to be in a 9 to 5 or working 80 hours a week and live out the call of Jesus in our life? And at the moment, we're going through a book called Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster. It's 12
Oh
chapters.
yeah,
So
good one.
every month we add a new discipline or new habit to our life. So we started off with meditation and then prayer. And this month we're focusing on fasting. And we don't do this to habit stack, like to add more in our life, but we use these 12 disciplines in order to recenter our lives back to who Jesus is in the midst of our mundane or busy lives. So that's one
Yeah.
thing that we're really doing now is how do we use the disciplines, especially these 12, which only 3 of them which Jesus talked about. The rest he lived out. But how do we use these to reorder our lives back to what Jesus has called us to? And what has he called us to ultimately? Give to the poor, feed the hungry, encourage those around you, live lives of integrity and kindness. Um, yeah.
Are you seeing transformation in that group or the group of people that are practicing this with you?
Yeah, are we seeing transformation? The answer is what Eugene Peterson said. It's a long obedience in the same direction. That we're going to stick at this thing for a long time, and I am not going to go into silence or a worship time or even a sermon moment to feel something. But on the other side of the practice, there is a person, and it's the person who brings transformation, not the practice itself.
Right.
That's okay. That is something. Once again, I hope others listening, especially leaders, don't miss, because I think that is a key component, especially when you talk about even longevity within any type of focused ministry, to use a word you don't favor again. I almost don't know what to call it instead. Like
Call it the
it's
ministry. That's what it is.
or call it the ministry. Well, but at the same time, I want to approach it with, and it's not just to be funny, but the idea of the gravity that should come with that. And what I love, what you're showing others, and seeing transformation in a way that it doesn't always equate to, oh, this group grew and, we saw more people, whatever, right? But it's no, it's that, I love that long obedience in the same direction. And how that should translate to the ministry leader's life as well, of these real practical, simple practices of just pursuing relationship, whether that's with our Heavenly Father, with those that we're in community with, or especially, as you even so well said it really towards the beginning of the ministry that maybe we don't even sometimes call the ministry, and that's at home. And I just love the practicality of that, because it's really not a one size fits all, or this is what you do, but you've actually been able to even contextualize it to where you're at with the people that you're at as well.
Yeah, and I think all disciplines, in my thoughts, I have realized that all the spiritual disciplines, which has become like a buzzword, but they fit into two categories. But their overarching is they have to be intentional. Everybody has a rule of life. Everybody has liturgical things they do. I heard American recently told me, they're like, we don't do anything liturgical. I'm like, you go to an American football game, you guys all sing the same song beforehand. Like it or not,
right.
kneel or stand, it's a liturgical moment.
Right. That's good.
Every culture has them. For the aspect of resend ourselves to Jesus or not, it's liturgical. It doesn't have to be a spiritual element. But all category of spiritual disciplines intentionally fall into two categories. It's either intentional solitude or intentional community. And I think we have got the community aspect in the Western Church getting better, not the intentional part of community, but we gather. I mean, COVID showed this. Everyone was like, we must gather. But we've got the community thing down, but we haven't got the intentional solitude in a busy Western civilization. So I even was writing something down in my journal today was, why is busyness equated with success? It wasn't, if I told people I played golf every afternoon of this week, they would just be like, oh, he's on vacation for the week, or he's got nothing better to do. And I'm not saying I play golf every, we have 26 inches of snow right now in Denver, but
congrats.
But why in church culture is busyness or not being able to talk to a pastor deemed success, when the person that we follow, a Middle Eastern 30-year-old man, for his life, his whole life was equated with being interrupted, as he was constantly withdrawing to lonely places to pray, and radically on mission. I mean, let's just think about the story of the 5,000, right? In context, he finds out his cousin was beheaded and his head was given on a platter to a local authority. And Jesus is with his boys. And he was like, if I could put some extra biblical subcontext, let's get away to grieve. They go away to grieve, and they are greeted with 5,000 men, plus women and children. Jesus' response to how do we feed them? Jesus' response is, that's not my problem, it's yours. Andrew steals lunch from a middle school boy, and Jesus, in his compassion and empathy, blesses it and spends time teaching and a monologuing, and it's beautiful. And then withdraws to a lonely place, which was always his intention, to spend time with his father, sends his boys away. And then if you read, and I mean, now it feels like I'm about to preach, but if you read as they were going through the storm, it says Jesus walked past them and intended on to walk by, which is a callback to Moses when, hide your face because I intend to pass by. And Jesus looks like he was radically on mission, yet constantly his source was silence and solitude. And then the other one that we don't talk about that he was very intentional about was eating, feasting, and celebrating with the people most close to him. Intentionally eating with them, doing liturgical practices of the day. So if Jesus did it, why do I think I can't?
Right. That's good. That's
Something
good.
like that.
And it's one of those things that, like you said, the busyness equates to success or doing it right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was Dallas Willard, that when asked one word to describe Jesus,
Relaxed.
you've heard this, relaxed, exactly.
Yeah.
And how often I think back to that, because the other one that's messing with me lately, and you mentioned it, was how Jesus was uninterruptible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been a reoccurring thing within even this year. I just feel like it's been interruption after interruption. Yep. And I had a moment of my own prayer retreat recently of God's not interrupted. And so if that's the case, if it's an interruption to me, God brought me to this moment, not the other way around. And how there is really something profound that takes place when I find a way to intentionally, I love that word you said, be present in those interruptions, whatever that is. You know what
it's
I mean?
Almost expecting them at a certain point, but you can be
yes,
so
absolutely.
busy, and this is why I don't like the word ministry. You can be so busy trying to do the ministry that you forget what you're actually doing in the first place.
Right.
Yep, that's right. That's
when
right.
I see people too busy, and I'm talking to myself, but too busy and overwhelmed, I don't think, wow, they must be successful. I just think, man, they've got their priorities mixed up. Not that everyone should be relaxed and, let's just go live in Portland and drink coffee all day long.
Sure.
But there's something about how do we be radically on mission yet interruptible for the small moments. Are you literally going to not be interrupted at the grocery store because you got to bring milk back? But if you're rushing around and always late to everything, of course you can't be interrupted. And so maybe our spiritual life, we said this to our young adults recently, maybe your spiritual journey with Jesus and your formational prayer life needs to look like doing a whole lot less than adding anything.
Yeah.
And it's countercultural. Christianity will always be countercultural to the norm of society.
Well, and even leadership, that's countercultural because, once again, like I said, we're expected to have, when I hear someone say, "Oh, I know you're really busy," and sometimes, there's seasons where I'm like, "Yeah, that's true," but I mean, what's the first thing that I don't ever say, like, "Yeah, you're right, so I'll talk to you later." Like,
peace.
It's no, but what's up, and to be present in that moment, that is countercultural. You're right.
I have to often say, just because it helps me, but I say, we're not professionals. Even though I get paid for this, I'm not a professional. I'm doing the same thing you're doing.
Yep.
We're learning together. We're growing together. And that's helped me just in being present with people, because now I'm not a professional. I'm just another guy that loves this guy named Jesus. And
and I think that's when
good.
ego can get mixed up. And I said this to a church friend leader recently, and I said, you're in your church, but you don't bleed with anyone. And I think as a leader, I said this actually on my first Sunday, but I want to be a congregational member before I have any form of what people would call leadership or authority or whatever that means, But am I actually bleeding with people? Are we around the table again? Always comes back to that. Are we around the table sharing actual things together? Not like, oh, I'm really struggling, and be like, oh, thanks for sharing. Let me pray with you. But actually I've been in this practice recently with some close friends of when we share our struggle and we sit with them. We don't pray with them in that moment. We don't give advice. Let's just share at the depth of your soul. And I'm talking about like the one or two people that you're the closest with. And sitting with someone in tension where they're in tears and not hugging them or not praying with them and not giving them advice is an incredibly intimate decision.
Yeah. It's and it reminds me, the thing that I hear even some of my past mentors just say is that that is the ministry. People are the ministry. It's not your to-do list. It's not the thing that you got to get done, the message that you think you got to prep, and those things do need to happen. But really that's what you're supposed to do. That outside of the vocational aspect of it. I'm curious, Andy, some of the stuff, because I think of some of this could could be a, to use your word, radical difference and even practice of how somebody might be operating, or even some of the things that they're doing that are counter to
Mm-hmm.
what really maybe should be doing and would be life-giving. What were some of the things that you struggled with, or maybe you would even encourage others that when you started to evaluate, oh, I got to do this a little differently,
Yeah.
or this is where life is actually found within ministry and leadership particularly? What were things that you had to adapt to, or things that you would encourage people to really evaluate and to
Yeah.
approach differently?
Such a good question. Before I give any sort of mumbling answer, the first thing is there. We've got to take some things slow. We don't have to.
Okay.
We don't. The Western American mindset will be like, well, let's just do the diet or fix it right now. And
Uh-huh.
I don't
Yeah.
think that's how habits and things are formed. I think for me was this ultimate question: is what I'm doing or what I'm not doing turning me into a person of love or not? And there's
That's
a guy
good.
called John of the Cross, again, from the old monastic movements. He wrote a book called Dark Night of the Soul. And
Uh-huh.
I've never shared this publicly, so here goes. But
Oh,
September
wow.
September 2020 was an interesting time for everyone. 6 months into COVID, we all realized, oh, this thing's not going away soon, and I just found myself burnt out. Marriage was on strained, and I'll tell a story that I don't want anyone to have shame, including myself, in, because I definitely do, and I hope this is okay to share publicly. But it was a moment of uh, definitely this is ministry and I'm hating it moment. Um, we our youth group was growing in numbers and maybe a little bit in through formation, but definitely through numbers, which is always a scary thing when one grows a bit, maybe not the other. And we had the entire cheerleading squad team come to our youth group, 18 girls. And when they turned up, I was like, here we go. And did a message, probably awful, talked about in John chapter 21 when Jesus says, do you want to come have breakfast with me? And when I did like what people would call an altar call, like ask who wants to follow Jesus and what he's called us to, 18 girls came to the front, the entire cheerleading squad, and gave their lives to the Lord, non-church background. And that night, the amount of texts and high fives and hugs I got as a youth pastor, the ego went through the roof. And people like, you should come speak at this conference, come do this. And my contribution to that was very little. If we just were trying to create an environment where Jesus' life and love could be fostered, and also make it fun by eating goldfish or whatever, and eating pizza and playing dodgeball. But that night, Chad, I went to my boys' room. I got home from the youth group at 2 a.m. And I went in, and if I haven't said goodnight to my kids, I'll go in and kiss them, on the forehead and do a little prayer for them. And as I knelt by their bed to go kiss them, not knelt as in like I was in deep prayer, just because physically it was easier to bend down in your 30s when you kneel than bend down. I realized I haven't seen either of my boys' faces in 3 days. And I lived in the parsonage in the parking lot. And I had been so consumed with ministry and people, and everything, doing the right thing, that I had neglected my own boys. And there's so much complexity in that. What things I decided, all this stuff. Long story short, through a lot of strain and realizing my priorities were out of whack and some things that were out of my control, I did a 5-day silent retreat in the mountains in Colorado, a place called Vicedo. And I definitely experienced what John of the Cross would call dark night of the soul. And there's a phrase in the book, and I'll see if I can get it right. And he says, the older I get, I no longer wrestle with the devil. We have both grown old and we're too tired. Now I wrestle with God and I hope to lose. And I spent 5 days, in silence, cooking steak and potatoes, drinking tea, and sitting on the porch looking at the lake, wrestling with what has my life become? Do I need to step out of ministry? What do I need to reorder? And that's actually where making a rule of life and Sabbath began, really hardcore. We attempted it before. And so what I would encourage to people was, when you look back on seasons in your life, what was the thing that carried you through? And what is actually forming you into a person of love? To me, removing my phone, removing my need to be people pleased by things I do, was a necessity for me to do. And started removing myself from different things I was doing. So for me to be radically on mission in that season, I had to do way less. And I felt like my heart and my soul started to become recentered and reorganized into the person I actually wanted to become. And I did it slowly, and they were dark. That was a dark 5 days, and I kind of don't wish that upon anyone, but I also wish it upon everyone. And I think you can only really understand if you've had one of those times. Some people, I know someone who went through dark night of the soul, and it was a lot longer. And sometimes it's normally equated with the death of a family member or a loved one or a loss of a job. But for me, it was a loss of my soul. I felt like I sold my soul to ministry. And on the outside, everyone thought I was what we'd call the bee's knees. Everyone thought I was doing everything right. And on the inside, I was dying. And I've never shared that like that before. But for me, it was that is where I met Jesus in a place in my soul that I didn't think was possible.
I'm really grateful that you did share that, because I bet there's probably more people that would maybe even listening now would go, I'm in that space, or they can resonate with that. And so thank you, number one, for sharing.
And to complete the story, I stayed as youth pastor there. We saw great things. I just shifted the way I did it. So on the forefront, people may not have looked like anything was different, but what it looked like for me was I started scheduling things in my workday, like hour meetings that were fake. Like I lied to myself, and I would go disappear and go for a walk for 45 minutes, which might seem unproductive. But what I started seeing was my perspective shifted completely. And when I came to one-on-one discipleship or dealing with conflict, I was way less anxious about it. I felt like I had more insight. And ultimately, I began to realize, this mystery this thing called Jesus is a lot more complex than. But yeah, if I didn't have that moment, there's no way I'd be in ministry right now, without a doubt.
Wow. Yeah. And and just to draw back to what you said before you told the story, a lot of what you've had to do, once again, is very counter to what we've always heard, and that's you just had to slow down, do less, simplify. You're preaching to me, whether you realize it or not, even with some of the things that as I'm perfectly considering and all that that type of thing.
And I say that, and then what does my schedule look like yesterday and today? Overwhelming. Like I was, a buddy of mine who's a real estate agent had to empty a house last night, so I took my 6 and 8 year old boy over and was like, "We're packing boxes, boys." And there is moments where you are going to be like, "Go, go, go." And then there will be moments when I want to say, and no. and
that's your book. That's your
too
next
much
book.
of a Beyonce song, it sounds like. But and there was this constant retreat and return for Jesus. Retreat, return, retreat, return. And yeah.
Well, and I think that because I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's probably one of the things that you think. So I can go at it and actually implement these things, but then life happens, ministry happens. And so when that takes place, and understanding that there are seasons where this is just how it is, how do you with intentionality make sure that does not become the new norm?
And that's why our rule of life kicks in. So most things it had to be crazy exception for us to agree to do something on a Friday night. We protect our Sabbath with all we got. So even birthday parties, we've said, like, if it's, before 4 o'clock on a Saturday, we probably won't do it. And I have gotten arguments with people about that. And I'm not legalistic about it, but I just realize if I have to at one point put some parameters down. Again, in church culture, we're really good about prioritizing Sunday morning. But I actually could say to some people, the best thing for your spiritual journey is maybe doing less. And I mean, if we don't, we become the people that Jesus came to flip the tables over for.
Wow.
And right, like
the professional Christians.
Yeah, and you can be.
Well, they weren't Christians, but you know what I mean. Professional.
Yeah, the philosopher John Foreman of Switchfoot once said this.
Yes.
He said, "You could be in church without the right mind, or you can be without of church with the mind of Christ." And one Jesus came to flip the tables for, and one doesn't look like it. And you could be in church. You could be in what people would call a dark arena, filled with the mind of Christ and becoming a person of love. Or you can be at church ticking boxes and more interested about the chicken wings you're about to eat. And that is highly convicting.
Yeah.
Well,
it also places the proper emphasis once again on what community centered around Christ should and actually.
But you asked a question, Chad, that I dodged, and I don't want to dodge every question you ask, so I'll do one. A good example of what we did very practically to help people like recenter their lives was last Lent, the period before Easter, which I think
which we're
our
in as we record
we are
this.
In our denomination.
Yes.
I think we get weird when we come to some liturgical or traditional aspects. But last Lent, I took 26 teenagers through Lent, and this was the rule of life during Lent. We met every Friday at 6 a.m. at Starbucks to process everything that we were going into and what we had experienced the week. So we did that 6 times. Then every evening at dinner time, you turned off your phone. This is 26 teenagers who did this. You turned off your phone, and at some point in the evening, you would journal for 15 minutes and then sit in silence. And then when you wake up in the morning, you'd sit in silence for 15 minutes before getting your phone back. There's these things called alarm clocks you can get on Amazon. I highly recommend them.
Mm-hmm.
And so you wouldn't have your phone with you. You wouldn't be consuming whatever you're consuming as you wake and as you fall asleep. And then at one point in the day, maybe while washing your hands or just go for a walk around the block the wrong way, recite the Lord's Prayer. And we did this for 40 days. And then 24 hours, have no phone. Delete your phone for 24 hours. We did this for 6 weeks, so for 40 days. I would be embarrassed to show you the results. Now, we had a couple of panic attacks, one nearly hospitalized. We had people who have never felt more present in their life. Suicidal thoughts disappeared. Like from just a psychological point of view, was like, oh my goodness. I had parents texting me saying, my kid just sits at the table and offers to wash up. What have you done? And remember, that wasn't part of the equation. I just wanted you to journal and come up with your thoughts.
Yeah.
And then when we gathered on Good Friday for our Tenebrae service, which the service finishes in the dark and it finishes very anticlimactical.
Yeah, those are great. We did one last year too.
Yeah, I looked at the group of individuals and they said that anticipation was overwhelming for 40 days. And so something like that to reset your brain can be really good. I did write up my paper for my master's, 172 pages on that journey, and which I wouldn't recommend to read. It's really boring, but it's insightful. But I have used things like Lent or the month of January or the month of September as moments to reset that. Highly recommend people doing stuff like that. I've got other resources that they can use too, but yeah, that's actually answering your question.
I think that's cool. Well, listen, I mean, it's once again, I'm especially when it comes to the practicalities of things. I think that's the thing, especially, from the vocational standpoint, we're real good at generalizing and even talking about things that, oh, you should be doing, but when there can be often a disconnect of what we say to what we do and what we practice, and even how, like you said, I love that the backyard's a mess kind of a thing. And this really lends to just some real simple, this is not a, you're going to hit that and it's going to be fixed right away, but if approached in the slow intentionality, is transformational, not just for the leader, but for those that you're leading, and leading and communion and community with that. Brenton, were you about to say something?
No, but I'm just soaking all of this up again.
This is good.
Continually.
This is good. This is what we pay Brenton for right there. The
soak it up.
The soak.
Yeah, hey, double it.
Yeah, he gets paid as much as all of us do.
Yeah. I think this is something that I know Foursquare's been not pushing, but has
come to surface,
given us information on. What's that?
It's come to the surface.
Yeah, it's come to the surface. Yeah. And we've recognized it as a movement. And these are things I remember years ago when we had Pete Scazzaro come in and start teaching through and walking through many of these practices with us. And I was thankful that I had leaders in place before we started going through this that really emphasized things like Sabbath and rest and just turning off your phone and those things that are just healthy for the normal person. And being able to implement a lot of those practices into the life of my family, I see just a big difference between the way that we live and someone that's stressed to the max because they're always going. And I would say that I probably am a busy person, and yet we have these definite boundaries of times to shut down and live life. And it's just helpful across the board. So I've just appreciated. That's why I've just been listening, because I'm like, yeah, okay. I feel like maybe we're doing something right.
Yeah. And some things are going to be countercultural, and then some things actually culture is always going to understand. I've been listening. I don't listen to a lot of preaching anymore. When I say I listen to a lot of like lectures or teaching, but there was a message I listened to recently from Tyler Stanton of Bridgetown, who said some fascinating things in the aspect of them no longer live streaming their church, which is countercultural to a lot of things. And when asked what's the biggest challenge that their church is going to go through, his answer underwhelmed me and then overwhelmed me. And his answer was wellness. When he unpacked it a little bit, and I thought this is maybe where I'm at, or maybe where as a denomination is, are we doing things like Sabbath and solitude and silence just to get our anxiety down so we can continue being productive? Or are we actually doing it because on the other side of the practice is a person? And I'm really concerned is that this is going to become mainstream, some of these like monastic movement stuff, in order to get our anxiety down or our productivity up. And I've even seen it in the way people talk, like, we need a Sabbath so we can stay radically on mission. Like, or maybe we need a Sabbath so we can abide and become people of love who are radically on mission. And there's a 1% difference on the navigation of that, but it's huge. And so what I've leaned into, especially in the last couple months, is spending time with people who are in the later stages of life. I had breakfast the other day with, he won't want me to say his name, but he's in his 80s. And I had breakfast with him and just came with all the questions. How do you become a non-anxious presence? How do you stay in ministry without hating it? He's been in it since he was like 19 and he's in his 80s. And the definition of a non-anxious presence, this mentor of mine. And when you hang out with people at that stage of life, you really see the priorities of life and what matters. And some things that he said that mattered to me, I was like, I wouldn't have thought that for, whatever. And then I was like, but was my message theologically okay on Sunday? He's like, oh, you're fine. And like feedback we're trying to get. And he's like, but how are the boys? Are you going to all of their stuff? And How are your neighbors? Are your neighbors doing okay? Are you chatting with your neighbors? Are you going on date nights with your wife? Like things, like, are you actually doing 15 minutes of silence and solitude in the morning? Like things that actually matter. And and how do we do that with our kids? How do we bring our kids into that? That will get you on your knees in prayer, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Is the question,
Sure.
how do I teach my kids this? The things that have formed me most about my
Yeah.
parents are never the things they said to me. It's the way that they handled situations. And
Yeah.
and that is probably the most discouraging thing I will ever say.
Well,
Right?
you got me. Yeah. So I don't have to.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I am. What does the psalmist say? My sin is ever before me. Right. I with my children, I especially am just like, oh, that is not how I wanted
And
that to go.
if we translate that to 2024 meme would be do as I say, not as I do.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. My goodness.
Like concluding thoughts in this, I think for that mantra for me of are we becoming, I'll use it in plural context, are we becoming people of love? I know that sounds really like hippie, but I think that is a bottom line. Like, are we known for being people of love? Are we being formed into people of love? But one thing that has,
Well, can you get specific with that
yeah,
though? Even because, and maybe that's what you were about to say.
yeah,
Because I hear what you're saying,
yeah,
but I do think when you say that, there are so many different
yeah.
things, even now, even culturally,
What does
that
that mean?
means that
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
it's
yeah.
so
So
far off. Yeah.
C.S. Lewis, I mean, he says, if you really want to see who you truly are in the deepest humanity, wait till you get interrupted and then evaluate yourself. But you can't control those moments sometimes. It's just what is inside comes out. I did a camp ages ago, and my message was entitled "What Happens Backstage Happens on Stage," and which is a cool youth pastor way of saying like what you do in the silence and by yourself, it comes out. What you listen to will come out. What you consume,
Right.
who you follow, all good and bad. We're all being formed into people. We're all being formed, and are we being formed into being love and lovable? Not even lovable. Are we being formed into people of love through the person of Jesus the Christ, or are we being formed or deformed into people of skepticism and hate and disillusion? And
Yeah.
I think what I have realized that Jesus had spoke very clearly on a couple of things. One about prayer. It's one of the only few questions in Luke 11 that Luke's version of kind of the Sermon on the Mount, when disciples asked, "How do we pray?" He says, "When you pray, pray like this." We have 100 days of Jesus's life recorded out of 33 years, and that's one of the questions he chooses to answer in that book, which I find fascinating. But and he does talk about giving to the poor, and he does talk about his kingdom is not only here, but is also near and has come before, which is Jesus saying that his own kingdom has not been fully established in itself, but it will be through for him, and the tension of the now and the not yet, if you read N.T. Wright's language.
Yeah.
But one thing that I don't think we talk about enough through Jesus' life is, as we become people of love, as we abide in Jesus, what does our joy actually look like? And so to put a bow at the end of this podcast of doing ministry without
Sure.
hating it, what is bringing you joy? It is an ultimate question, which there's always things that are bringing us joy if we choose to see them or not. And my friend Michael says this. He goes, when you pray, whatever comes to the surface, ask Jesus to give you the strength to deal with it, the light to expose it. And if it keeps coming up multiple times, it's probably time you do something about it. Normally it means picking up a phone call and apologizing. That's what it normally equates to. But as we've become people of love, where is our joy level at? Because if our joy level is squashed, what on earth does that happen to the people that we're leading and loving? And I think that's why I kind of love laughing. I don't like having this secular sacred divide. I enjoy making fun of my friends and them making fun of me. I enjoy. I just think laughter is a medicine that or a desire that is in our hearts, you know. And if Dallas Willard say that Jesus's main quote was being relaxed, how much did Jesus laugh? In the midst of his own death and betrayal. Not saying he laughed at that point, but he did say on the night of him dying, I will do this to bring you great joy as you find joy in me. And like, I can't even say that on a Wednesday morning, let alone the night before I'm dying.
Sure.
So where's your joy level out? I think would be the bow at the end. Yeah.
That's good.
It was a statement,
that's
not a question. Yeah, I think I think it's, I mean, I enjoy laughing. I think it's fun. I think life is to be enjoyed ultimately. And I think as Christians, we should be the most, I think we should be in tears and laughing nearly at all times. Tears of sorrow and grief and, of joy. But if the early church, if people came and joined the early church because of this statement, quote, what is so different about you? You're ordinary people. In a society that is constantly depressed and pointing the finger, what does it look like for a group of followers of Jesus to be filled with laughter and joy in the midst of the the culture of that, not to be ignorant, not whatsoever.
That's good. That's good.
But,
Andy, this has been fantastic.
Thanks, man.
So practical and so just from a place of just really what God has done in you and continues to do. I'm so grateful for this time. Thank you for that. Thank you for your friendship.
Yes.
And we're just grateful for all that you bring to the ministry and to leaders that you serve as well.
Thanks, buddy.
Once again, we want to thank Andy for really giving us his time and just a lot of really great stuff. If you'd like to connect further with Andy, we've made ways to do so available to you in the episode show notes. And if you'd like to connect with us further, support the podcast, or sign up for show updates, you can just go to withouthatingit.com to get started. And don't forget to subscribe to Ministry Without Hating It, wherever it is that you get your podcasts, so you don't miss out on our future episode releases. Thanks again for listening. And listen, we'll see you next time.